Whenever we do these Bike of the Day videos, I always want to show you something that's unique, special, or one might even say iconic. And that can be obvious when it's a really rare, expensive motorcycle. The last few episodes we've had a Bimota DB2, Ducati Desmo Sedici, an Aston Martin AMB 001. At first glance, you might look at this as a 250cc Honda and go, well, what's the big deal? Well, I'll tell you what the big deal is. This thing is a record holder. This is a Honda CBR250RR, specifically the MC22 generation. And this little bike has an engine with the highest Redline that you could get in a production motorcycle. So what is that Redline? Well, officially it is 19,000 revolutions per minute. Again, 19,000. Formula One cars weren't even getting to that kind of number until a solid 11 years after this bike came out in the mid-90s. Now, to be fair, when you're riding the bike and you're looking at the tach, you get the red section of the tachometer at 18, but again, the official number is 19, and you can rev it until 19 until the fuel cutoff comes into play. It is very hard to describe what that's like because there's basically no comparison for it in the world of motorcycling. Nice thing is, for this video, I did get to spend a few miles on this bike, covered some distance, and we'll include some of that footage as part of the video. So that 250cc engine we're talking about, cam gear drive, inline 4-cylinder, makes 45 horsepower because that's what the Japanese market was limited to at the time. And it really is such an interesting thing for me as an American rider to see something like this. This was not sold in the US. When I was growing up as a child of the 80s and getting interested in motorcycles in the 90s and being old enough to ride one in the early 2000s, my first bike was actually a 2008 Kawasaki Ninja 250. And it was just about the same bike for 2 decades. I mean, Kawasaki introduced that bike in the late 80s, and they had such little competition from all the other manufacturers that they just kept making the same thing for years. Now, it's not a bad bike. Lots of people are very happy with the Ninja 250 as their first bike, but it's just such a dichotomy between what happened here in America versus what was happening in Japan. In Japan, due to licensing requirements, the 250cc class and the 400cc class had all kinds of competition, and they were constantly getting innovations every year, which is why you got little screamers like this. That Ninja 250 that I grew up on, was very excited about, parallel twin, very basic, just a good, simple commuter. Something like this, again, as an inline 4 that screams up to 19,000, it's a lot of fun. Is it low on power? Is it low on torque? Sure, relative to the rest of the world of motorcycling. But it's one of the funniest things to be in first gear doing 20 miles an hour, 25 miles an hour, and just having the revs up, you're screaming by. It, like, to everyone else that doesn't even know what's happening, it just sounds like a Formula One car is going by, and then you look over and it's some guy just putting doing 20 miles an hour on a bike. So the MC22 was the final generation of this bike. It started a few years prior, but it was called the Fire Blade, as you can see over here, and a lot of people affectionately called it the Baby Blade because it was the smallest of the lineup compared to, say, like a 900RR. Now, as I mentioned earlier, 45 horsepower, really not much torque. If you were gonna ride this in a place where you're constantly having to leave stop signs or stoplights, can be a little bit of a chore. Frankly, under 4,000 RPM, this thing isn't really doing anything. After 4, you're starting to get some momentum, but you really want to keep it above 10,000 RPM, especially in the corners. If you come into a corner doing less than 10, it's almost, you kind of get that 2-stroke feeling where, oh, I'm in the wrong gear, it's bogging, and you got to sort of downshift or wait till the power band builds up again. You're going to be shifting a lot. It does have a 6-speed transmission. It's got a couple other things that you might not expect for just a 250 of the time period. So in addition to the 6-speed transmission, it's actually got the cam gears that we were talking about earlier, as well as dual rotors, dual calipers, that kind of thing. So the brakes aren't incredibly powerful, but they're 4-piston. They're more than enough for what you have here. The bike weighs just under 350 pounds, which so your average rider getting on it is going to weigh more than half what the bike does. I am too big for it. The ergonomics are surprisingly comfortable. You could really spend several hours on this and be fine if you were on the shorter side. 5'8", 5'9", probably might be the upper limit of true comfort on this. Again, the ergonomics as they're laid out are fine. I personally found as I was sitting on it for the ride that my upper body was fine, my hips just got cramped up after about 30-40 minutes because that seat to peg ratio there is, or not ratio, but that distance is pretty short. So I sort of mentioned earlier about how you could spend extended amounts of time on this bike and be fine, and that might sound silly at first glance, but I think you'd really be surprised. Look, in a bike that revs to 19,000, sitting at 10,000 isn't really a problem for that motor. Sitting at 10,000 in top gear on this, in 6th gear, would mean that you're about 100 kilometers an hour. As you can imagine, the dash on this is in kilometers, which roughly equates to 60, 62 miles an hour. But yeah, it's a little weird, I think, for the average rider to be doing 60 miles an hour and seeing 10,000 revs on the tack, but the bike's totally fine, it's comfortable there, and you can keep cruising going faster with no problem at all. In addition, this bike has a surprisingly practical trunk. Let me just pop this open real quick for you here. There you go. I mean, look, so first of all, you've got the little clip here for your helmet holder, and then look at the space that you have in here. Sure, you could ride with a backpack or things like that, but it's always just nice. As sports bikes get more extreme nowadays and things like that, it's always nice. The 90s were really good about this, I feel like. Bikes that were sporty, not extreme sports bikes, but they were sporty, you could have fun with them, but still live with them and throw your paperwork, throw a sandwich, whatever you need to do, water bottle to get around for the day. I love seeing stuff like that, especially with the 90s bikes. So I want to end this video with two things. One, this bike right here in front of you is currently on our auction site and it is being sold with no reserve. So whoever has the high bid is going to win it. And I think they're going to have a lot of fun with this considering how ahead of its time it is. Again, the idea that you had a 250cc bike making 45 horsepower with a good frame, decent brakes, good suspension, it was so much better than what we were getting in America, and I would argue that this was just as good as like something that came out 20 years later, a Kawasaki Ninja 300, for example, kind of thing. It really is such a joy. And of course, they're just super rare. You pull up on a bike night or something like this, and everyone's gonna want to talk to you about it and learn more about that 19,000 Redline. So this bike is up on the auction site right now. Congrats to whoever ends up picking it up. Number two, normally when we do these bike of the day videos, I'll just kind of fire it up, rev it a few times, try to let you hear what it's like. But in this case, we actually use this for a different video series that we're doing here on Iconic. It's called Just Ride. And the idea is that there are some bikes where I just want you to hear it. I don't want to have a long introduction. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to have music playing. I just want you to hear the bike and show some cool shots of it riding around. Something with a 19,000 RPM Redline we thought was worth sharing. So, you know, we'll put a link to that video in the comments or in the description of this video so you can check that out. But also we'll just include some highlights of that in lieu of me starting it up. Let's have you just see what it's really like out on the road to enjoy that. As always, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments and we'll see you with the next one.